Hello and welcome to the next episode of The Podcast, a cannabis podcast for budding enthusiasts. As always, you're joined here by your boy, Heavy Days, here from the Upside Down Library. And as usual, we want to give a massive shout out to our incredible sponsors who help make the show happen. Seeds Here Now, your number one seed bank in the industry, a guarantee on satisfaction, not just germination, with all the hottest breeders and the latest drops. Why would you go anywhere else? If you finish a grow and you're not satisfied with the end product, hit them up. They'll make it right. They only stock the highest quality breeders. And I know they got some fire packs from your boy Heavy Days there. Check them out before they're gone, guys. Massive shout out to Seeds Here Now, your number one stop for all your genetic needs. But in order to get your garden pumping on all cylinders and producing the best crop to date, you got to make sure your room's dialed in. To do that, check out our friends at Pulse Sensors. Number one sensors and integrated hubs in the game, measuring all of the variables, PPD, VPD, temperature, humidity, dew point, all the extra variables you don't consciously track to help ensure your next crop is the best to date. Whether you're running a single tent, a single room, or a multi-state operation, Pulse Sensors are the number one in the game, and they've just recently released the Pulse Hub, a central unit to integrate all of their monitors to make sure that your rooms are the best they can possibly be. Massive thank you to Pulse Sensors. We appreciate you so much. Likewise, you've got to keep your garden pest and pathogen free, and to do that, you've got to check out our friends at Copit. These guys are the world leaders in sustainable biocontrol solutions for pests and disease. If you're battling spider mites, check out their new Spidex Vital Plus sachets. These are new Persimilis breeding sachets that release predator mites into your crop consistently over a period of several weeks, providing you with sustained spider mite control. Now you don't have to spread carrier material through your garden just to introduce predator mites. Just hang the sachets on your crop, let the Persimilis walk out and do the work for you. Trust me guys, you don't want to have to go up against a spider mite infestation without Spidex Vital Plus. These are truly the best predators in the game. I promise once you use it, you'll see the quality, you'll never go back. Massive shout out to Copit. Likewise, you got to check out our friends at Organics Alive. If you're growing organic and want to use high quality powdered organic fertilizers, you simply cannot go past Organics Alive. These guys truly walk the walk and talk the talk. They have been picking up cups left, right and center with growers all around the country, sweeping categories using their products. That is the ultimate testament, in my opinion, if home growers are winning competitions using their products. The proof is in the pudding, guys. No matter what stage of the plant cycle you're at, veg, transition, flower, in need of micronutrients, or a very specific sort of boost in late flower, they've got it. You've got to check out Organics Alive, guys. Truly one of the best in the industry. We're super stoked to be working with them because we know how amazing their products are, used in heaps of breeder gardens that we have on the show. Again, check them out, Organics Alive. Massive thank you. Massive shout out for supporting the show. Finally, a massive shout out to the entire crew at Dynavap. These guys make some of the best vaporizers on the game. I'm really passionate about this one because they help me to get off combustion and smoking bongs. If you have any concerns about your respiratory health, or heck, if you just want to try a different mode of ingestion, maybe try to get a better flavor hit, you've got to check out the Dynavap. These guys' units are cheap, they're incredibly well designed, and most importantly, they're very customizable. You can take your vape game to the next level, getting insane terps, all while retaining the potency you'd expect of a combustion or a bong. Truly, I was smoking bongs for over 10 years. I'm now vape only. Massive shout out to Dynavap. They're one of the best in the industry and we owe them a massive thank you. Shout out again, Dynavap. Massive thanks for supporting the show. Finally, a quick little mention to our Patreon gang, truly the lifeblood of the show. If you want to get early access to episodes, unheard and unreleased interviews, as well as going in the running to get amazing genetics each month and fortnight, come on, check out the Patreon at www.patreon.com/thepodcast. We do live Smoke with Heavy sessions every fortnight and give away heaps of swag every month. Come check it out. We love you, the Patreon gang. Thank you so much. We are so appreciative. Here we are, guys, part 2 of the epic interview of Marty of TK Origins. Florida native, creator of TK, OG, here to talk some history, some plans for the future, so much more. Let's get into it. Beautiful stuff. And I wanted to ask you, there's weirdly like a lot of reports online, and I've never really known much about it. People used to say that the white was very similar to the TK. And like sometimes the name, like the white used to be called triangle or something like that. Do you know anything about that at all?
Yeah, actually, when I was talking to the Swamp Boys around 2017 while I was living down there in Central America, and we had some conversations for a while. We had some mutual friends, and once we started talking about who we knew back in Florida together. And I was talking to Chrome, and he told me the story. The white came to him as a plant called the triangle, and he was definitely interested in hearing the story about the Emerald Triangle and any sort of relation. And actually, the white, I've only seen it one time, but it was at my friend Craig's house, and that was the closest terps that I've come across since back in the day with the Emerald Triangle. But I don't think it's the same plant because I took an ounce home and it dried out. I dried it out a little bit more, and it kind of like lost its terps, and it was a little bit more bland tasting than I remember. Definitely didn't have that sweet floral thing going on that the Emerald did, but something about it when it came out of the freezer had those exact like memorable terps from back in the day, and that was the closest thing I've seen to it. So I told Chrome that whole story, and I can't. It's only speculation because I don't really know for sure, but it could be related. It could be a seed of the Emerald Triangle or something related to it somehow.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've just never grown the white personally. I've only seen it in flower form.
Sure, sure. I actually haven't tried the white myself, so I have to try some. I definitely want to say I tried a really nice Puro Loco, so definitely that was a good one from Archive. I wanted to ask you, because in terms of the whole storyline, in recent episodes, we'd had Not So Dog and Inspector on the show, and they both commented that they felt like they'd seen some discrepancies within the storyline and posts from maybe like IC Mag over the years and on different sources. They sort of felt like there had just been inconsistencies between the dates and the ages. I guess the question is like, has there ever been different, has your memory changed over time? You're like, oh, I think I was a different age, or, where do you think this comes from, this view?
That could be from the second time I went to Amsterdam, which I went to the Cannabis Cup there, High Times Cannabis Cup. At first, I thought for some reason that I went there for that trip in 91 or 92, and I'm pretty sure I might have mentioned that to a few people here and there. But come to find out later on, after talking with Adam Dunn about a few things, that it had to be later because we had shopped at this place called the Gray Area Coffee Shop that trip, and we bought some good flour from there, and they told us where we could find some seeds and of the stuff we bought there, like bubblegum and AK-47. And there was this place called the CIA, which Adam, I guess, owned or he was partners with at the time. And all it was like this little black door up this like abandoned looking building, and it had the 3-letter word CIA on it. So it was like sketchy even walking in the door. But we were given directions by this guy at the Gray House or the Gray Area coffee shop to go there. So I'd known I had shopped at the CIA and maybe had met Adam. He looked familiar to me after all that, and seen him on the podcast years later. So the discrepancy might have been where I thought it was 91, 92 when I went on that trip. It was actually 1993 because we basically think there was the year he opened that place. And I remember there was this huge hemp plant growing in the middle. Like you walk in the door and you go up the straight staircase that would go up to like a lounge. And there's a bunch of people hanging out, smoking. And there was like a desk where they were selling seeds there, I think. And there might have been like a little DJ booth set up. And in the middle of the room, there was like this huge pot with this giant hemp plant. And it looked like a bamboo trunk. It was like huge. Never seen anything like it before. And it was like probably 15 foot tall, growing to like a sunlight up the top of the building. So when I ran that story by Adam, he told me it had to be 1993 because that's when he had that going on. So, thinking back to when I first came out, basically with my story, actually it came out, I started going online while I was stuck on house arrest and probation before I moved down to Central America and long before I created Origins. And I started searching Triangle Kush, and I found some stories here and there from people talking shit about how it came to Florida from some military guys, like from overseas, and brought seeds back. Other stories are talking about how it was named after the 3 cities in Florida, being Jacksonville, Tampa, and Miami. which I laughed at all those stories. And I might have chimed in a couple of times saying this is all bullshit or whatever it was. And I got people telling me, oh, you know what you're talking about. So it wasn't very long I was on there at all. Whatever story I told back then, I don't know. I was drinking at the time. I wasn't smoking. I was pissed off at the world. I was pissed off at the government. I was looking forward to getting off all that stuff so I could move on and start growing again. And at that point, my wife and I, our fiance and I, had plans on moving down to Latin America, where I had already built a house. So I was just wanting to be done with everything. And if I was on any sort of IC mag or whatever that was back then in those days, and it was just to like try and correct people that were spreading rumors that were false about names and how I got named and where it came from and stuff. So that was my time on there. As far as Not So Dog goes, me and him had conversations when I first created Origins, and those guys even invited me to their Emerald Cup parties that I went to a couple of years in a row with Josh. And it seemed to me like right after the pandemic, I went to the last Emerald Cup before the pandemic and before the elections, and came back from that trip. It was like wet and cold and gloomy, and I came back sick as can be. Probably had COVID, who knows? So I get back to Central America, and basically after that, those guys stopped following me for whatever reason. I blame it on something that I might have done, like on one of my posts that's kind of like political, I guess, thinking back to it, and I'll never do it again. But this was during the elections. It was during like the riots that were happening everywhere. There was chaos, there was lockdowns, and then COVID. And where we lived, it got really strict, and they had us on curfew every night. There was driving restrictions, and the beaches were closed, and it was like really hectic. And around that time, for whatever reason, those guys just stopped talking to me. I don't know if it's because I made a political post that was like against this administration that had just gotten voted in or whatever it was. Not like I was on either side, because I don't think either side are good. They're all evil, both political parties, and like I'm directly in the middle because they both have their good things and bad things. But I'm definitely not on either side. So for whatever reason, I made some stupid post about anti-Hillary and anti-Biden and anti-China, and it was just kind of like a meme, I guess, at the time. And immediately I got all kinds of like shit for it. I got people DMing me telling me I'm a scumbag Trumper. I had people DMing me telling me to fuck off and unfollow me and never want to talk to me again type thing. And that seemed to be around the same time that I like lost those guys as far as like followers go, as far as like Matt Riot and Not So Dog and some of those other guys. So I don't know if they're on me over that or what it was, but as far as the dates go and my age, for sure I was 17 on my first trip, and that was 1989. And then the second trip, I was a little lost on at first, but that was definitely 1993. And at that Cannabis Cup, anyone that was there would remember there was, as you walked in the doorway, there was these two big plants growing that were live flowering plants. And I remember specifically they were Durban poison, because a friend of mine that I went there with walked up and grabbed a little nugget off of one and put it in his pocket, thinking it was going to dry out on that trip. We get to actually try some Durban poison. But as anyone knows, in Amsterdam in November, which is when the Cannabis Cup was back then, it's so wet and rainy out that like nothing will dry. You have to have a dehumidifier to get anything dry there. So yeah, I don't know. Those guys could be the reason why they're talking shit. I've had plenty of conversations with him, and I actually found my conversation with him at some point. And basically in the conversation, I told him straight up, we were popping seeds from the seed bank and from Sensi Seeds. I might not have told him I went there twice or whatever it was, because the second trip wasn't really related to the OG triangle story, or I don't know. That might have been the reason why I didn't say I went there twice, but I definitely went there twice. The second time was more for fun, and I went to chill and relax, and I had my own money that trip, and went for almost 2 weeks with some friends, and had a good time. And that trip we brought back, like I said, the bubblegum, AK-47. At that point in time, the seed bank was closed, I guess because Sensi Seed, he got in trouble, everyone knows about, and then Sensi Seeds had bought them out, and they were still working out of the castle. But at the time, they opened up a new store in like real close to where we were staying, like walking distance, across from like the Cannabis Museum or Hemp Museum, I want to say. So that's where we shopped some Sensi Seed genetics that trip. And we also, like I said, we got stuff from the CIA, from Adam Dunn's crew. And I think we even stumbled across some seeds at like a little like random head shop somewhere that was selling mushrooms, and they had a bunch of like, it had like Purple Star and a few different random things that we grabbed out of there too, seed wise.
That's great to hear the storyline, and I can appreciate the response for sure.
I mean, their parties that they had at the Emerald Cup were super sick. And I mean, it was Matt Riot's parties at the time, along with a couple of his friends and his crew.
You know what's funny? I think I was at that one you referenced, the 2019 one. I'm bummed I didn't bump into you.
Well, it was like on a vineyard, like a grape vineyard or something.
Yeah. The long driveway.
So yeah, you didn't see Josh D there that night?
Oh, I probably did, but I was pretty stoned.
So yeah, I was with him and a couple of his crew, and I know Fletch from Archive was there that night. And that's the first time I got to see the Moonbow that he brought like a bunch of jars of, and that's too bad we didn't get to meet that night. It was a fun party.
Yeah, shout out to Matt and the Can Illuminati. That party was awesome. So yeah, good to hear your side of the story for sure. Let's go back to the storyline. So you've sold these, these bags that have the seeds in it, and that's gone. How did that progress? Because you've mentioned a few times you moved to South America. How did you sort of progress to that after, the inception of the TK and OG?
All right, so I had moved from Jupiter. We skipped a lot. I moved to Jupiter in '94. Like I said, I bought my first house there, and I stayed there till 1999. The house there, I got chased out of there basically by a lightning bolt. I had a stolen power rig going on. I had to actually take a year off from growing because some of the older guys I knew in South Florida were having some issues, and there was a lot of heat going on. So I took a while off. And during that time, I was making surf videos, and I started this partnered with this company. It was a friend of mine that started this company called Crypto Clothing. It was around like the late 80s and most of the 90s. And it was surf based, but like also weed related. And it was him taking his art and putting them on shirts. And then I joined in with another friend. And so for a couple of years, I kept moms alive somewhere, but I didn't grow any flower. And we tried to run that company while there was a lot of heat in South Florida, and I was trying to stay cool. This is when I was in Jupiter. So at that point, I started growing again, I think close to 98, 99, I want to say. And randomly one day, I never had stolen power in that house before, but for whatever reason it was, I was broke and I was getting desperate. And I had a friend that knew how to steal power and do the power rig. So we set up my house that way. And the day we were doing it, there was a storm rolling in with lightning and stuff. It was sketchy. So we kind of rushed the job. Drilled the holes through the wall and ran the whole thing through the meter and to a panel inside the house that he built me. So I don't know if we didn't ground it right because we were rushing that day or whatever, but maybe, I don't know, like a month into a batch that I had set up in the garage with 10 lights while living there. I was on the phone one day. This is when we had cord phones still. And I'm on the phone with a telemarketer trying to get this lady off the phone. And there's a bad storm going on, lightning hitting and crashing and thunder. And like, I tell her like, look, lady, I don't want what you're selling. So I hang the phone up. And the second I hang the phone on the wall, lightning struck the house and basically zapped half the line coming into the property. There was 2 lines coming in and it zapped one of them. So immediately I knew something was up. The house started like dimming and going through kinds of little power surges. And I started smelling burning wires. So I had to go unplug everything immediately. And it was a full emergency mode basically. So like the power lines where they met from the outside to my house got struck by the lightning out there and melted it completely. So one of the lines coming into the house was still working while the other one wasn't. So I had to take everything off that one leg. And basically I was broke at the time and I was just trying to get this batch done, and still had a couple weeks to go. So I took like 10 lights worth of plants and crammed them all into one room under 2 lights or 3 lights at the time, and trying to finish them off under the melting, burning, stinky power in the house, which was super sketchy and fire hazard the whole time. But I finished it, got that out of there, cleaned the whole house up. And I had basically the guy came over, we undid the power. But at this point, we had these huge holes in the wall, and I was sketched out that the power companies were going to see, and they're going to come out and fix it. They're going to have to open my meter. So I waited till like a Friday evening when everyone was like dying to go home from work, and I called the power company and told them my story that I needed help. The place got struck by lightning, so they sent a crew out. They get up there on the roof, like no gloves or nothing, and they just like fix the shit up like super fast. Never opened my meter, and it was done. So I took that as an omen, like the whole lightning thing. And I was like, already been in that house from '94, and it's been like 5 years. I was already sketched out from being in South Florida where some of those guys had started getting in trouble. So at that point, I decided to move north another hour to where Craig and that whole crew was basically. And that's basically in Florida. We have the Bahamas that block a lot of the surf from hitting the southern beaches. But up there in Central Florida, we get a lot more consistent surf because the waves get around the Bahama Bank. So I always went up there surfing my whole life, and it was just a matter of time before I wanted to move up there, and I did. So it was 99 was when I bought my house up there. So 99 till 2011, I was living in Brevard County, and I was buying houses. I bought a little owner finance when I first moved up there, and then I started growing in another house I rented, and from there I bought another house, and I started doing little fixer-uppers. And this is before the economy or the real estate market took a crash. This was like early 2000s. And this is when they were giving out loans like candy, like here in America. I don't know about there, but I basically got a loan for a $400,000 house, hardly showing any income. There was like no income verification back then. So you could just say how much you made, told the banker, and they sign you, as long as you got the money, they sign you up and you're good to go. So I got this big ass house up there in the north side of the county. It was like a 3-car garage, huge 4-bedroom on 2 acres of property, brand new construction. And that was 2004 it was. And that was the house I would end up getting busted at. But at first I was there from 2004 till 2011, and that's when they got me. So during that time frame, I was growing the triangle, juicy fruit, G13. I had some white widow, some of those hash plants still around. Super skunk hash plant I was talking about earlier. And yeah, it was that house one day that they would come get me at, basically. Somebody tipped them off. And this was under the Obama administration, where at the time they changed the rules where they can come in your house without a warrant based on saying they smelled something outside by the road. And they used that to get in my place. So yeah, that tied me up for a solid 4 years, a little longer. And then after that was over with, and I got off house arrest and probation. I actually got off probation a year early, luckily. And we moved down to Latin America at that point. My girlfriend I was been with for 13 years now, she was from Colombia, and she was all on board with moving down there. She spoke perfect. She's bilingual, 3 different languages. And yeah, as soon as I got off probation. I got my passport renewed through the website versus waiting for the courts to give it back to me. And within a couple of weeks, I went down there and started prepping for us to move down there, basically.
And what was life like down there?
But it was awesome at first, and it was awesome in the end too. But there was a point somewhere in that first year where we had a home invasion. And at this point, we had given up everything in Florida. I lost everything I had to foreclosures. Like, we sold everything we had in garage sales, and we pretty much gave up our life in Florida and moved down there. And I had 2 places down there at the time, and we moved from one. We lived in one for 6 months, and I was growing there. Everything was fine. And then we moved to the bigger place, which was older and it wasn't really up to date. It needed new windows. It needed like new security and whatever. So within a couple months of living in that big house, they were like compounds. They had like walls around them. The one did. And then next door, there was 4 houses with some friends of mine, and we all built a project together. And I had one of those places next door. So we moved from the smaller house to the big house, me and my girlfriend at the time. And I don't know, within a few months of living there, one late night, I hear the dogs barking outside, and we're going to bed. It's like midnight. I look out the front door or the front window, and I see a little blue flashing light at our driveway at our gate. It looked like a cop light. And I wasn't growing in the house we were living in, but there was something going on next door that I was worried about. And I had weed in the house, and I think I had a separated garage that had some equipment, maybe some trim in it. So I was a little nervous when I see the blue light out there. And next thing you know, in the headlights, I see all these bodies running towards us, towards the house. And I screamed at my girlfriend, like, I think the cops are here. I think the cops are here. And just like that, they started smashing the front door. A couple of them went around the back. They pepper sprayed one of the dogs we had on the property to get by them. They got in the sliding glass door and grabbed me, put me in cuffs, basically covered my face and put me on the ground. They grabbed my chick who was in the other room. and they kind of like had us separated at first. And I thought we were basically getting raided because they were all wearing police uniforms. They all had guns. They all had masks on. They were wearing like the reflector uniform, like bulletproof vest looking uniforms. So they all looked official. So that was scary shit. And, we're in a third world country thinking we're getting busted. So at some point I started peeking around. I seen they had my girlfriend tied up in like speaker wire, not handcuffs. And immediately that looked fishy to me. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? And then I looked around a little more, and they're kicking me and like telling me not to look, but they were like stealing shit out of the house. They're asking me for money and weed, or where the weed was and where the money was, in Spanish. And my girlfriend's translating to me like, look, they're going to fucking kill us if you don't give them something, which, they picked the worst possible time to come because we had like $300 cash, and I had maybe a couple ounces of weed. The garage, I said, had some these old Mars Hydro LEDs that weighed like 100 pounds each. It felt like they took those. They took the bag of trim that was out in the garage. They cut open our couch looking for money. Like, they were adamant to find something, but they couldn't. So at some point, we had 4 Rottweilers at the time, and that buddy of mine that was living there for years before we moved there started collecting these dogs and bringing them down there, and lived there with 4 huge Rotties. So we had 1 on our property that was old, and 3 were next door where the other houses were, and they were all younger and acting super mean and barking at the walls when the guy's trying to get over there. So they had my girlfriend, they were asking her to like let them over, and they asked me to let them over, and I was acting like I didn't know any Spanish, which I kind of didn't at the time. And basically we both said the same story in different rooms. Like, they're not our dogs. They're super mean. I wouldn't trust them. And I can't get over there myself. This is basically the story we told them. So they kept taking stuff from the house. I had I think I had a brand new mini split unit AC in a box that they took. That was like the most valuable thing they found. And at some point in time, it just got silent. Like, they all left. I think they heard some noise on their police scanners that something was going on, or maybe somebody had heard something or whatever. So they all left in a hurry, and it just became like super quiet and eerie. There's no sound of dogs or noises going on anymore. And like, I got the handcuffs in front of me, and I went and untied her, and we went for help. I went next door, and they never got next door. Luckily, thanks to those dogs. I went and grabbed my friend, who never heard a thing, because next door we had bulletproof glass, and the place was really more modern and newer and real efficient. So he never heard a thing going on at the house. So I went over there, and he cut the cuffs off me with a pair of bolt cutters. And basically that was just like a full nightmare. So I had to make the decision if we were going to stay down there or go back to Florida, what we were going to do, because like I said, we'd given up everything at that point in Florida. And living down there was beautiful, but just this shit happened. But like I said, I felt like because they didn't get anything and they didn't find anything or see anything going on, that we were kind of in the clear, I felt like, a bit. So I decided to make the call to stay down there. And we went ahead and like fixed up the house, and I got new windows and new bars on the doors and cameras, and I got a couple of guns, and we had another dog or 2 to our pack, and we made the call to stay. I wasn't growing there anymore, obviously, after that, but we made the decision to stay there. And after a while, things started to dust started to settle, and it was going back to normal again. To this day, if a barking dog is outside at night, my fiance, she jumps up in her sleep and freaks out. She's got PTSD badly from that. But other than that, luckily we made it through safe. I mean, I actually had a gun in my head, and they're doing a countdown multiple times talking about, if you don't give us the weed and the drugs, or the drugs and the money, we're basically going to kill you. And I just didn't know what was going on. I was playing stupid, and somehow we made it through that night.
That's incredible. I mean, I can totally understand why your girlfriend would be so traumatized. That sounds very intense, to say the least. And yeah, staying down there, bold move. How did that play out? Were you growing at a different place? Because you said you weren't growing there. Were you growing somewhere else and selling the weed locally?
Well, I had a little house next door that I was growing in, and that's where they were trying to get to. But like I said, the Rottweilers kept them out. And we were selling the weed to Americans that lived down there, and people that would come and go traveling. I had a friend that had a restaurant there that he would help out. We had a good amount of friends that lived there for years too. That would, it moved pretty good. And actually the prices stayed nice and high there for years too. until later on, somebody from California started shipping containers of weed down there, and it brought prices down from like 4,000 a pound to like 2,000 overnight. So there was that. But actually now it's legal down there in the country we were in. I think it's at least medical, and it's getting ready to go recreational soon, I want to say. So things have changed. When we were there, if you would have gotten caught, you're looking at some third world jail and prison time, and definitely way sketchier than doing time here in America.
Certainly. So what was it that stimulated you to make the return to Florida?
Well, somewhere later on, actually it was COVID and the whole lockdown thing, that we thought where we were was going to be super like lenient and like easygoing, but for whatever reason, they became like super strict and tyrannical. Like they had nightly curfews, and the beaches were closed, and there was even surfers were getting shot at by the cops for like going surfing a couple of times. So at some point we started to get sick of it. They had the borders closed, so we kind of felt trapped, at the time. So I made a decision that as soon as the borders were open again, we were going to try and make the call to go somewhere else. And at the time I was thinking Florida, California, I wasn't sure, but we ended up settling with Florida. And the reason we chose Florida also because at this point in time, I was talking to somebody after I came out who was working in a company in Miami, Florida, and they were building a huge grow with intentions of getting a license from the next round of licenses that Florida was supposed to give out. Because in the beginning, when they gave out their original amount, it was only 22, and they were all vertical, so it's only large corporations involved in Florida. And they didn't get one at that time for whatever reason, so they were waiting on the next batch. And Florida kept kicking the can down the road, further and further, and it kept dragging on. So the second they opened the borders in Central America, we got back here to Florida. Actually, I found a house on Craigslist, and it was owner finance, which always worked out good for me. And because I didn't think I had credit, and I didn't have that much money at the time, so we found this place on Craigslist on owner finance deal, and it was during the lockdown, so I couldn't even actually see it in person. We had a friend come and check out the place and do an inspection for us. We did a deal that seemed sketchy through a small title company, and I thought we were getting robbed at some point, but it all went through and worked out. So the guy in Miami I was talking about, they had the company, they were still waiting on their license, but he made it sound like within a year they would have it for sure. And I visited their grow a couple of times from where we were living, and it had a super like high tech 1,000 light giant building, and they're doing all these big rooms and stuff. And so it seemed for sure they were going to get it. It's just a matter of time. So in my mind, we were coming back to work there to do some sort of a deal with him. And then they're going to grow my genetics and maybe launch my brand there. And that was the plan anyway. So a year went by, and they never got their license yet, and still haven't gotten it to this day. And at some point in time, actually it was a couple of years gone by since then, but I had to sell one of my places down there where we lived in Central America, and brought that money back here. And we were kind of living off that for a while, and it was starting to run out, and these guys still hadn't got a license, and things were starting to look like, where are we going to go next? And somebody I had met at one of the Emerald Cups years prior, actually the same year, I think you were there, 2019, I want to say. He's one of these guys that's from Miami. He's Dominican and Cuban, and he's part of the whole Washington Heights, New York Hayes group. So he's down here in Florida along with another friend of his, a partner that was Cuban, and we all met at the Emerald Cup, and we talked on social media all the time. They seen that nothing was going on. I was sitting around doing nothing, and one of them hit me up. This Freedom Town Holdings is the name of their company, and they got a deal with one of the big companies here. I guess the first 5 are grandfathered in the chance or the opportunity to hire outside help to manage their grows for them. So they got a deal with one of the big companies here to build a grow, and then run it for them, and basically produce the flower for this big company. So they hit me up, and they're like, "Hey, I see you're not working for the other guys yet. They haven't got a license yet. You want to come talk with us maybe?" So that's how that started. So I went and visited their grow, and we started conversations back and forth about what we could do and how this might work, and back and forth for a few months. And like I said, the money was starting to run out. I was painting as much as I can and trying to live off art. My my fiance, she teaches yoga, so we were just kind of getting by, paying our bills and living here in Florida. And then this opportunity came along. So since I couldn't legally grow here without worrying about things again, now I have a record now. So at this point, I didn't want to take a chance. So she didn't want me to do it either. So I jumped on the legal game and took these guys up on their offer. And since then, we've worked out something where, it's like I get some royalties from them growing my genetics, and they have them all throughout the state. I visit the grow every week, and we talk every day, via cell phone or video phone or whatever it might be. I go as much as I can. It's a couple hours away from me, or I'd go there every day otherwise. But yeah, that's how that whole thing started. So I jumped from one company to another. The other company I was originally going to work for, they still haven't got the license, and they got their grow sitting there just kind of like collecting dust now. I guess they're finishing up, and they should be getting a license soon. But if I had waited for them, we would have been dead broke and probably back to Latin America by now.
Huh, wow, that's an interesting journey you've come along. And do you have any plans for the future? I know you've mentioned the name Origin Select to me.
Well, yeah, that's the brand that we got going on here now. So Origin Selects is like a side brand within Freedom Town Holdings. Sold at Fluent, which is statewide. They have like 33 locations now. And basically it's a small menu of my personal favorites, including Triangle Kush. There's a OG Kush on there, a couple of different ones we have. We have a bunch of stuff that we're finding from my seeds right now. We did some big seed hunts of like 100 each. We have a YOG that we're about to pick a couple of, which is Wildlife crossed with OG Kush. And that came from Josh and his crew. We have Tahiti Lime crossed with Lemon Royale, which we're calling Tahiti Twist. But then the state made us change it because it sounds too much like a candy. So now it's going to be Tahiti Royale. That was something I made down there in Latin America too. Then we have a handful of others basically, but they're all pretty much TK or OG related. I'm going to try and work on getting some seeds made with that Colombian Gold Panama Red that I told you about earlier with those guys, hopefully. It'd be nice to search some of those. And some of the guys at the Freedom Town, they're all on the haze thing. So they have a lot of hazes that they grow there. They have like a Mexican lemonade and a cake boss and a few different things that are like haze related to take a little longer to finish. So they're trying to get hazes going on in the market here. And at first, the OGs here, they didn't really take off super fast, and I didn't expect them to because it's more of a California thing. But like once people started to hear the story a little bit more and actually go in and try some of the flower, it's starting to build up a little bit of momentum now, and they're selling out a lot faster. The first couple of batches actually were, like I told you about the hurricane earlier, we had some stress from the hurricane, and the first couple of batches were plants that got beat up from the hurricanes, and then the building was still not up to par. We were fixing rooms and ACs, and chillers were not working properly, and CO2 kept going, and it's almost like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. Like it worked great, but you had to like keep working on it and keep banging things around and fixing stuff. That's our common joke about the building.
That's cool to hear that, from the story, as well as that you got the menu curated by yourself. And I like that we hear a little bit about some sativas in the mix. I don't know if you've actually said it yet. Do you have a soft spot for sativas at all, or are you just more of like an indica dude?
Like I said earlier, I like mixing things up. I don't know, it's something I've always done, I guess. The more flavors I have in my collection, the better at all given times. So I always have some sort of sativa around. Yeah, I definitely have a soft spot for some good sativa. I never like growing it indoors as opposed to smoking it, because usually growing them, the good ones indoors, are you're talking 100+ days. And here in Florida, we didn't really have that option a lot of times because once things got stinky, it was time to like start worrying about taking things down before your neighbors started learning what was going on. So because of that, we never even let the triangle or the OG, well, not the OG, but the triangle, I never let back in the day go beyond 60 days, I think was the max, 56, 60 days. And it was just because the whole house would start to stink around the property and your gate and your doorway. And at that point, you start getting panicky and you start taking things down early, I guess. So I never even actually ran it a full length back then. I even had an East Coast Sour Diesel for a while back then too. That was one of the original cuts. And I think we got that around 2004. and I ran that one side by side with the triangle a lot, and it came down at 60 days a lot of times too, but it was still mostly white hairs, and for whatever reason, it still tasted banging, and everyone loved it, but I never really got a chance to run that a full like 75 or 80 days. The triangle, we've been running in some different rooms here, and we went 80 days on it recently, and it didn't like that. Like after 70, it started to get bleaching and started freaking out a bit. Didn't really look that great at the end compared to the rooms that come down to like 65, 70.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, in fact, I hear a lot of varying answers. I myself, I love OG.
Well, I was just saying, now that we could actually run them longer, I like 65 to 70. That's my sweet spot personally. When I was down there in Latin America growing them, I was pretty much at 65 days on average. Like back in the day with the TK, we didn't have this is carbon filters came around. I forget when it was close to like around 2000, I want to say. So anything prior to that was just super odor, like stinky problems outside your house. So you always had to worry about that, especially like those plants I was talking about earlier, the super skunk house plants. A lot of people I know actually got busted for growing like a single light of those genetics back in the day, and like a lot of them only got probation because it was small batches. But I would pull up to a couple of friends' houses and my car windows open, just smell that stuff like blocks away. Like holy shit, you got to get that stuff out of here now. So but yeah, back then before carbon filters, everything came down sooner than it should have. Obviously, it was just because of smell. We used to make these big garbage cans with pine sol, and we would drill a bunch of holes around the top of the garbage can and put a box fan on top, and fill the thing up as much as we can halfway with like pine sol, and that was our like makeshift smell cover at the time, along with like maybe some ozone machines back then that were super unhealthy to breathe. Like that, I just hated that stuff. Like, we had them over the doorways of our houses, but they didn't really do much. But they give you a sore throat. And I think carbon filters came around closer to like 98, 99, I want to say, or something, maybe a little sooner. But we weren't getting them in the stores here until later. Speaking of carbon filters, I never knew they were full of like little tiny charcoal bees inside until I had gotten busted. And the cops basically had fun in my house with sledgehammers and just destroyed probably like 6 large carbon filters. And they were spread across the entire house, these little charcoal like BBs that basically stained everything, all the carpets, all the tile, the walls. Like it was a mess. It took like a month to clean that house.
Wow, that's intense. So, a few questions ago, we were talking about sativas, and I definitely wanted to ask you, because I've noticed how talented you are at art. How has cannabis affected your creativity and specifically your art? Do you find specific strains, interact with your ability to create art differently to others? And what's your take on the whole cannabis influencing art?
Oh, absolutely. Like as long as I've been enjoying painting, it's always had to be weed involved. So normally I would have my bong and my lighter, or I use a herb iron now because I don't like butane from the lighters anymore. And so that was always part of the process. Basically, that's getting super high, whether it's sativa or indica or whatever it would be. That's where my ideas would come from. At first, my paintings started off as like famous surf breaks around the world, and I was usually just giving them out to friends or like as presents or whatever to family around holidays. And over time, like once I got involved with that clothing company I told you about earlier, crypto clothing in the 90s, that's when I started to put a little bit more effort into creating paintings of like beachscapes and surf spots and putting them on shirts. And that's when it kind of gave me a little bit more of a spark to like start painting for a living and as like a side job kind of thing, which I enjoyed. So it went hand in hand. And yeah, I was definitely always stoned when I smoked or when I painted. I mean, it was always part of the process for sure. And since I came out in the last 5 years, I never painted weed before because I never thought it would really be something that would sell or people would be interested in. But once I started painting a couple of cannabis plants here and there, I gave 1 or 2 away to the guy that was going to do the Miami farm and get me down there. They're going to probably still have them on their office walls once they get them up and running. But it was later on after that, actually, that I think I like giving Josh a painting and a couple other people. And next thing you know, I was getting a lot of compliments. and started painting more. And then a couple originals started selling and started getting a little demand for it. So now just I don't just paint beach scenes or waves anymore. It's pretty much a mixture of weed. I've been trying to do some like different theme stuff with like Jaws and a astronaut holding a plant on the moon and stuff like that. So yeah, everyone's been loving that kind of stuff. And actually, because of these themed weed projects, that actually helped me get my deal here in Florida, because those 33 stores that I'm selling my product out of, they want to hang art in all the stores and put a QR code next to them and link them to my website. So I've been slowly working on getting them to as many stores as I can. I think we're in like 4 right now, but there's gonna be more coming. So yeah, that's been a good part of the process now. And now that I incorporated weed to my painting.
Wow, that's epic to hear, and I highly encourage everyone to check out your website, or definitely at least the Instagram. They're really awesome looking artworks for cannabis. I really enjoy it myself. I wrote down, I forgot to ask you earlier, and I want to touch back on it before I forget. You know, way back at the start of the episode, you mentioned you had some experience with the crippy, and I wanted to hear a little more, because it's actually one we haven't heard much about, even across all the episodes we've done with people. You know, no one's really ever had too much knowledge about it. Did you know anything about it?
Yeah, that's almost like a whole episode in itself. But in a nutshell, I can tell you that it was some of the first weed I ever smoked. Like going back to that day I was in school, and that guy gave me a ride to the beach with him, and that day I met all those people. He actually had some crippy on him that day, crippy with a K. Basically because it was named that because I'd find out from him and other people that the people that were growing it were surfers up here in Central Florida, and they were like, one of the guys was a pro surfer. He was probably 20 years older than me. He actually won the Pipeline Masters surf contest in Hawaii, like in the 70s, when like nobody from Florida was winning those things back then. It was strictly all Hawaiians or Australians. So he was the first breakout person from Florida to win a big event like that. He happened to be growing the crippy up here in Central Florida, and along with his crew. So that was before my time. I didn't really know those guys that well, but I did know a lot of his crew and younger friends that were involved. Like there was a few pro surfers that that guy knew and that I became friends with years later. And a couple of them actually moved to the same country I was living in Central America. So that whole thing was around from, I'd like to say 86, 87. And then those guys were growing it until around 89, 90, when something happened where they got busted. And that was the last of that original kryptonite, which it went by at the time. And it was based on the kryptonite from the Superman movies. And that's why it's spelled with a K. And that name came about one day in a van with all those same guys I was just talking about up at Sebastian Island one day, surfing and smoking a joint. And one of the guys named Pat, who was a pro surfer at the time, said, "Man, this stuff is so strong. It's like kryptonite from the movie Superman. It was like it would kill Superman, you know." So that was like their phrase, and that's how the name stuck. So that was the first weed I ever seen that was just like absolutely incredible. That guy that gave me a ride to the beach that day, he had like a bottle on him, and on the way to the beach, he was telling me the story about it. And he told me he asked me if I smoked first, and of course I was like yes. And he told me to reach under the passenger seat I was sitting in and look for a film can. And I found it and pulled it out, and sure enough, it was loaded with this neon green, this vibrant, sticky, stinky weed that they call it crippy. So that was like the first generation of crippy in Florida. Crippy is short for kryptonite. And like I said, it's spelled with a K. So not many people knew that story about the van and how it was named after the Superman movies, unless you knew some of those people, I guess, involved. So after those guys got busted around 90, I want to say, Miami Mango and a couple other people I knew were getting a new batch of crippy that was getting shipped in. And I guess it just kind of took over the name because the name was so popular and it was just catchy. And at some point, that name kind of became like a household term in Florida for weed, I guess because that original one was so good. So the next one that started coming in that Mango was talking about and still talks about was shipped in. Supposedly, I've heard stories that came from Seattle area or from Portland, somewhere out there in the Northwest. And the reason they say that is because it came in these PVC tubes. wrapped in newspapers from out there. And I guess that's maybe somebody said they did that to throw people off of where it came from. But it definitely wasn't grown here. That batch, that second generation of crippy that was brought in or shipped in from somewhere. And that one was, for some reason, it's just crazy prices. Like people were selling it for 150 a quarter at a time. I think I want to say, like, even Miami Mango was selling it for like $500 an ounce all the time. And doctors and lawyers and whoever had a lot of money at the time were just scooping that shit up. So that was the one that was in the 90s. And then at some point closer to 2000, there was another one came around. Could be just be name playing, people, using the name again of a popular strain. But then there's one called the Tampa Crippy that a lot of people swear by. And I've seen pictures of it. It looks a lot like an OG type plant or something, but different, like a little like meteor looking. And I haven't tried that one myself yet. I've got seeds of it to try one of these days soon, but I haven't actually tried that original Tampa version. So yeah, there's like 3 different versions of the crippy, and then I even hear people adding a 4th one to the mix, saying there's one that's kind of like hazy. It smells like haze when it's smoked, which I haven't seen anything like that yet. Yeah, and then of course there's the guy out there in Hawaii that claims his dad created crippy, and later find out it was actually the crippler that they started calling the crippy after maybe chasing stories from here in Florida and trying to add something to his story or whatever. I don't know what it was, but I don't talk to that guy anymore. So yeah, that's basically, that was, and then there was also the fact that, like I said, it became a household name. So just like Indo or Green Bud or Kind Bud or thing like that, crippy became like a term that people used for like anything that was good grown indoors. And because of that, like when Alec Anderson first came out and do a podcast years ago, before hearing my story, him and Matt Bubba, basically told the podcast that they found the OG seed in a bag of Florida crippy, just using the term as loose, like household name, like I was talking about. And they didn't really mean it came from an actual strain called the crippy, but basically that threw people off. And that might have been why that guy in Hawaii actually ran with that story and then started telling everyone that the OG and TK actually came from his dad's crippy and whatever. So yeah, there's that part of that story. Yeah, the first time I ever saw the crippy, like I said, I was 15, and the last time I've seen it was in the 90s. The real crippy.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, because I was going to ask you, a lot of the times you hear crippy mentioned, it's often in relation to like some relationship to OG. So I guess the question is, given what you've said, that bud you got that day in the film canister, what was it like? Was it anything like OG?
I mean, I was super young then. I just know that it was super fire. I seen it a few more times after that. I actually grabbed some bags here and there from my neighbor, I want to say. I think my dad used to get it from him too, possibly, because I used to go through my dad's closet once in a while and I'd find little like ounce bags that I would take a tiny little half gram out of and take it to school with me, and just, everyone that's seen it was just blown away. I remember it was just like some of the most neon green you'd ever seen, and it definitely had, it kind of did have actually like a big OG kind of structure, like in the sense that it was like big acorn shaped nuggets, I want to say, but just different. It had way more kick. I think it did too back then. Back then I was younger, and you got the thing with nostalgia. Maybe if I seen it now, maybe not as good as it seemed back then to me or whatever. But everybody that I knew back then, that's what talked to that used to get it, swears by that being still some of the best stuff they've ever seen. Even some older guys I know. So one guy actually I knew that lived up here on the beach that I used to be friends with and go surf at his house all the time. He bought like a pound of it before they got busted. And he kept that thing for like 2 years. Like, yeah, I guess he had it buried on his property or something, and he'd pull out like a quarter ounce at a time, or maybe it was frozen. He would pull a quarter ounce at a time. So like for a couple of years after it had gone away, I would see and smoke it at this guy's house up here in the Melbourne beach area. And it was just like, I just remember it being like this big acorn shaped neon green nuggets that like, I don't think they had much like hairs or anything to them. It was just kind of like all pod on pod, but real dense looking. And it wasn't sealed up. It wasn't the kind of stuff that was being shipped in, because it definitely was grown here. I definitely know for a fact, like when those guys got busted growing it here, some of the people that were involved like left Florida because they didn't want to get their family involved with the mess that might have come later. And one of the guys' dad was like a senator here in Florida at the time, so he went down to Central America. His couple of his friends went to Central America too at the same time. I guess everyone kind of scattered. But that original guy that won the Pipeline Masters, he definitely got busted and did some time. He's actually still in Hawaii. That guy goes by Crawford, the last name. His son actually is now a surfer, and he's surfed really well. I think he's almost pro, and I just think he just wants to be left alone. And people try to reach him to talk about all this stuff with him, and he's just kind of to himself. And I actually have mutual friends of his, but I never met him myself. People I talked to, I've asked if they could like reach out to him one day, and it's just never happened yet. Maybe one day it will.
Yeah, hopefully one day. I'm sure everyone would love to hear it. That's interesting to hear all about the crippy. Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned nostalgia in there, and I wanted to ask you this question. A lot of people, I think, look at OG and TK to an extension as well, in a sense, as sort of the last big name before cookies really rolled onto the scene and just started to dominate everything. And some people have the view that, we've really started to bottleneck a lot of genetics, especially in the context of, each strain seems to be in that very dessert menu style sort of genetic lineage. My question is, would you agree? Do you feel like we've started to bottleneck? And more specifically, do you think OG and TK were like the last stop before that? Or do you think like that's not necessarily the case?
I think a lot of good things have come across or come around since then, I would say. But like as far as the OG or as far as the cookies and gelatos and stuff goes, I'm not the biggest fan of most of them, but I've definitely come across some really good crosses like Skittles. This YOG I was talking about, which is incorporates wildlife, which is like cherry pie. So those are really good I've come across, but they're also crossed with OG, so it's not like a direct cookie by itself. Which cookie has OG in it too, so I mean that's in there. But I know what you're saying. It's basically I hear the same thing from a lot of people about the breeding is going too far in that direction, and most of the West Coast is just kind of leaning towards the purple gelatos and those kind of genetics lately. And that's what everyone's breeding with. I actually have friends that are on the legal market out there, and like they can't sell anything that's green. Like everything they grow has to be purple, or the buyers come and they just like pass it up and they're wanting to buy it. But they basically have to sell something green for like $1,000 less a pound type thing. So that's part of it. Pretty sure because the West Coast plays a big part in this whole weed thing, and they have a lot of hip hop scene, a lot of rap culture. Pretty sure Burner from Cookies and a lot of people had a big part of all that as far as like making these genetics blow up like they did, and the rappers all singing about them, and the Sherberts and this, that, and the other. So yeah, it's hard to say that whether it's being bottlenecked in that direction completely. But I mean, I definitely in the underground scene, there's definitely a lot of people growing some radical sativas and mixing up, skunks and stuff like that. Like Todd McCormick selling a bunch of different seeds from like the Northern Lights now and bringing back all those old genetics and skunks. And so there's definitely a lot of hazes getting mixed into the work now. Now that New York's going on up there, they love the hazes. So like my buddy here that one of the owners of the company, he's from that scene up there. Like I said, he's got a friend up there named White Boy Kev, and he came out of hiding recently too, and so he's all up in the scene. He's one of the Dominican crew that was selling the Piff and the Black Haze up there for years. So yeah, I mean I was actually up at an event up there recently, and the scene up there is just blowing up. Like everyone up there is buying shitloads of weed. It's probably one of the biggest markets in America right now. Even though they're fumbling their legal game and legal licensing and all that stuff right now, like the state keeps postponing and everyone's getting fucked. The underground scene out there is crazy. Like we went to PIFCon recently and it was just out of control. Like everyone had tables, like a flea market just selling tons and tons of hazes and all kinds of exotics that like an African haze I ran into and a couple like really cool plants, that weren't just strictly gelatos or whatever. So it's good to see there's a mix of everything going on right now. And I would say the West Coast market definitely is leaning towards that more than everywhere else, I would say.
Yeah, it is awesome to see, the resurgence of the haze, and to an extent I've seen like, a lot of sour heads given a bit of a push. So really cool to see things coming around. And I wanted to ask you, Do you have any plans to make any seeds? If so, what sort of stuff would you want to do?
I have a couple little collabs going on at the moment. I'm still going through seeds that I made myself while stuck on lockdowns. But out of that stuff, we found a lot of interesting stuff for my menu here in Florida. I have another project going on, which is going to be mostly OGs out west at the moment. Um, so yeah, I'm working on a few things. I'd definitely like to get a little bit more into it and start putting some other genetics together with the OG and TK. Like for example, I was talking about that Colombian gold, Panama red would be a really nice cross, I think, to one of them. So we're working on things like that. I gave my buddy some TK back cross seeds that I had worked on a couple times. So it's like actually like BX2 now. So he's gonna try and find a couple male in there that we can maybe use. And so yeah, there's a few projects going on.
Yeah, that's cool. And I guess, as a bit of an extension, who are some breeders whose work you admire or enjoy?
Personally, I have gone through a nice collection of Swamp Boys gear, archive seeds. So when I was living down there in Central America, before I created Origins, I had reached out to Crone after hearing stories about those guys being related to the Triangle. And at some point, I realized that the guy we got our cut from was associated with them, or partners with them, or worked with them, or something. They were just close friends, I guess. So we hit it off at first, and just before Origins was around, they sent me a nice care package down there. And out of those, I found the Lemon Royale to be my favorite. I found a real nice female, and I found a male, and I made a bunch of seeds with that male. A couple other males I had down there, like a Donkey Dog OG. And actually, Matt Wright gave me a banana tie, which I found a nice male from. I had a platinum sherb and a couple other males that I collected pollen and just little like projects here and there, just some paintbrush projects. And I actually did a couple closets that I set up a male with the Lemon Royale in and a male of the Donkey Dog. So all the seeds I made down there were just small projects, but made a lot more than I expected to. Actually, some of the stuff was archives work too. I had his Pure Loco and his Tahiti Lime, which I found a real nice one. I had a Black Triangle from Bodie. I had a Love Triangle also from Bodie. That was actually one of my favorites down there. Had like a kind of a cherry Play-Doh kind of aftertaste smell. So yeah, out of those seeds at this legal spot now, we've been doing like 50 to 100 at a time. And out of those batches, we've been finding some real nice stuff. The lemon royale I had down there had a real tangy lemon tree, but like gas kind of mix going on, and it made good sized plants. That was my keeper, and I made a bunch of seeds with that one. Hit it to the triangle back cross. I hit the original TK, the original OG with the male I had of it. So it's just little batches from those we've been finding stuff in. We recently went through 60 YOG that Josh gave me that were super nice. We ended up keeping like 8 that we got narrowed down still to 2. The Tahiti Lime I crossed to the Lemon Royale. We found one that was real similar in terps to the original Lemon Royale I had down there. So yeah, I've been working with those guys things for the last few years. Archive definitely made some nice stuff. I like all his Moonbow gear. I like all the face-off crosses. Other than that, I have this plant someone gave me here called the Platinum TK, which was in-house seeds, platinum Kush, I think it was, Kush mints, crossed to a Bully Kush. The guy selected and said it had a very TK-like trait. Bully Kush was from Seed Junkie, and that was a triangle to triangle back cross, I think it was, BX. So yeah, just kind of like trying to stay within that frame, but find different stuff. Trying to like keep it to where it's TK or OG related for my menu. But yeah, like right now I'm working on a project out west with some guys that are probably going to be the 92 OG and the Ghost OG and the TK, and then they're going to be hitting it with some of their stuff soon. So maybe doing some work reversal projects as well, hopefully.
That's cool to hear. And you've got me thinking, I wanted to ask you, like, as a company that's offering like primarily OGs in today's market, do you find there is still the demand there, or do you feel like people want that, purple gas candy thing?
Well, what we do is we only do like small batches at a time. That way they don't sit around too long on shelves. So we do like probably 10 lights, for example, and that will feed 30 plus stores. So by the time the next batch comes out, that one's sold out. And so I'm going to probably have one genetic in all of the rooms. So it'll be like 11 different ones going at all times. I'm going to have a sour diesel, a couple of OGs, the TK, then I have like a lemon cross. I have the Tahiti lime and a couple other tangy ones. I have the cheddar koi, which is from my friend in Hawaii. Gave me some seeds, and that one's super different too. That was like a Big Island koi cross to MOB. I think it was from Karma Genetics, which was like a cheese crossed. And I think what else was in that one? I think there might have been like a Hell's Angel OG and cheese crossed to that Big Island. So yeah, there's some different stuff. And then we're working on, like I said, getting some sort of more like sativa leaning thing on my menu as well soon. So yeah, trying to mix it up. As far as the OG and the TK, at first, the first couple batches that went out, the market wasn't really ready for it yet. And it kind of sat for like a month and a half even. And when they first went out, we had some packaging issues where the packaging room humidity sensors were off, and like some of the stuff was going out good, some of it was going out a little bit moist. So we had to correct all those issues and basically almost had to do like a relaunch to get it out there again. And once we fixed that, things have been really good, and things have been selling out every time, and everyone's been really happy with everything. And a lot of people here in Florida, like our market's 10 years behind the West Coast, because of the way things have always been. So people here aren't as educated, and the majority of the people here that are in the market have a med card, which the market here is completely monopolized, and like it's all, it's in favor of these big companies. And until that changes, we can't have any home grow. And there's actually trying to go recreational next year, sponsored by one of the biggest companies here now, but they haven't had home grow added yet, which no one's really happy about. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think when the market kind of like comes to gets a little bit closer to recreational, and people's, like right now you have to go to a doctor and twice a year, and it costs like $150 or $200 a year, I think it is, to keep your med card going. And then there's the whole thing with the guns here, where a lot of people just don't want to have a med card because they can't have a legal gun. So yeah, a lot of things got to change first before out here. Like basically people are just not educated. Like I said, it's like in California, so they're slowly getting there. We're catching up fast, but at the same time, we're still way behind. So it'd be nice to see if we went recreational, then obviously it's going to open up for everybody more, and hopefully they're going to get out more licenses, and maybe they'll even let people have smaller mom and pop businesses eventually. But as of right now, it's just these huge juggernaut companies that are running things, and I don't know if it's the governor here or just politics in general, big pharma, whatever is really behind it the most, but it's stayed that way since we've been back here, and we were hoping it would change by now a little more, but it still hasn't.
Yeah, certainly. I think we can only hope, cannabis laws worldwide relax for everyone's benefit. I can appreciate your frustration with that for sure. I've got a bit of a left of field one for you, but I wanted to ask you because I think you might have an interesting answer. What do you think the genetics might be of TK and OG if you didn't know yourself about, the Emerald Triangle and the Hindu Kush? And maybe a better way to phrase it is, what would you pitch as an alternative genetic combination that could make the TK or the OG?
I would definitely jump into the category of Northern Lights along those lines because, like I said, the plant, the Emerald Triangle came from out there where the Northern Lights came from. And then also in the last several years, there's been a lot of information come out from Neville and other people talking about the modern day Kush lines are very much like the NL2. And then on top of that, like going back to the late 90s again, Miami Mango used to get this cut of the Northern Lights too. I don't know if it was from somebody brought back seeds from Amsterdam or if it was an actual cut brought from out west somewhere or what, but it was definitely some of the best Northern Lights I've ever seen. And he just called it NL2, but it definitely had a very popcorn, kind of like TK structure to it, and left a really like nice aftertaste after you smoked it. It would like kind of linger on your palate for a while type thing. And it was one of my favorites for personal. And I never grew it, but Mango would get a pound of it here and there, and he would always call me up, and I'd come and grab an ounce once in a while. We didn't hang out a whole lot back then, but we communicated through mutual friends, and like I said, there was definitely a handful of times I grabbed that off of him. That was one of my favorites that was coming around, and it definitely had shape that I remember of like these big chunky acorn popcorn nuggets. A little bit more dense maybe than some of the stuff going around back then. So that was good call. It was probably NL for sure involved, whether it was what numbers or whatever. Like I said, Neville even claims that all the modern day Kushes were basically from his NL lines, or that he was breeding with out there at the time.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I can understand where you're coming from there. So I got one last one before we do the final 5 questions, and I wanted to know what sort of plants in general do you think cross well with TK and OG?
Well, me personally, I haven't had a whole lot of experience breeding. Most of the stuff that I've come across has been accidental. Those little projects I did on lockdown are pretty much my only experience with breeding. I've learned a few tips and tricks here and there from, actually from like Matt Wright when we first met, was talking about reversals and teaching me stuff about that. A few other people along the way here and there give me some tricks and some tips, but I haven't really had a whole lot of like hands-on experience breeding yet. I'm looking forward to it, and I have all kinds of things in my mind how I like to do things, but just haven't had the space really to do it yet. And this legal spot we're at, we've had conversations about setting up a room just strictly for breeding, but it just hasn't come to fruition yet. Hopefully that happens soon.
Yeah, hopefully that happens. All right, well, let's get into the final 5. So the first one is, what's the single most memorable or impactful cannabis experience you've had? Doesn't have to be the most potent weed, but just what's left the greatest impression.
Well, it'll probably have to be some of those first ones, like the stuff we were just talking about, the kryptonite, I would imagine. That was just something magic about that stuff that, it was the best of the best that we've seen back at that time. So that's definitely comes to mind. That Hawaiian skunk I was talking about earlier that we would pitch in on as kids, that was one of them. I really enjoyed having the juicy fruit for years, which is what this Colombian and Panama kind of reminds me of. Like I said, that was another good one. Obviously, the triangle, when we first started growing that, it wasn't really for selling. It was more or less for growing it for ourselves, because it was making these skinny little plants at first until we figured you had to top it and get it pretty big before you turned it. So that was kind of like an aha moment when we figured that out and started like being able to put pounds out of that for people. Yeah, and obviously, like when I learned all this stuff related to the OG Kush in my story, that was an aha moment too. Definitely, and it's still going.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I like that. So, on the other end of the spectrum, what's a strain where everyone you knew was hyping it up, you were getting really excited to try it, you finally try it, and you're a bit disappointed?
Um, hmm. Well, there's a lot I still haven't seen that I'd like to see. Like I've never actually grown the chems yet. I've had flower form of almost all of them. I've had the 91, and yeah, I did kind of resembled some gassy notes to it for sure. My friend in Hawaii sent me some small amounts. Then I also had somebody send me some Chem D, which I was expecting to be like the all-time best ever. And I don't know if it was the real cut or not, but to me, it just didn't remind me of any sort of OG or TK like everybody was saying it did. It was, more on that funky, almost like GMO-ish, bad breath kind of funk, and onions and mushrooms smell, I remember. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. It looked really nice, but I was expecting it to be just way different as far as, I mean, it was definitely stony, I remember. I don't know, like I said, whether if it was the original cut or not. I heard there's multiple cuts out there, just like TK and all of them basically have some imposters going around.
Yeah, certainly I could appreciate that for sure. So, next situation, right? I'm going to drop you off on a desert island and you only get to take 3 strains with you for the rest of time. It can be a clone or it could be like a pack of seeds. What 3 things are you going to take?
Well, just based on this old memory I've had recently of the juicy fruit, that one comes to mind. Definitely the TK, and probably one of the sour diesels, maybe even like the East Coast sour diesel that I had. Now I know like since then there's all this information about different cuts of the East Coast sour diesel. I don't know which one I had, honestly. We got it from a friend of ours here in Florida, traded a TK cut for it, and that was around 2003 or 4. And that was one of my favorites for sure. No, wait, let me take all this back. Definitely the TK, the juicy fruit, and that hash plant number 4 that I had back in the day. That would be the top choice right there.
Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Okay, so on to the final one. I've got a time machine for you. Oh, no, sorry. I've skipped ahead. I've got too excited. Let's go back. All right, so in this one, you've lost your entire genetic library, right? You got nothing. All you can do is have 1 pack of seeds. It can be something you've got now or just, something that is available. What would you restart your genetic collection with? Just 1 pack of seeds.
Ooh, that's a tough one. 1 pack of seeds. Well, it's not going to be a pure anything, obviously. If I can get a hold of some of those super skunk hash plant seeds again that we had in our collection, that would be the all-time greatest, because like I said, if you pop 10 of those seeds back in the day, you're going to get 8 that were almost worthy of keeping. Definitely 5 for sure that were like, holy shit. And they all had like different like variations and smells and whatever, but they're all extremely stinky. So yeah, I'd have to go with that super skunk hash plant.
I think we may have some overlap then. So now on to our real final question, which is that I've got a time machine for you. You can go back to any place, any period, presumably to get some seeds or a clone. Where are you going to go? What are you going to get?
Probably to Mr. Crawford to get a cut of the kryptonite, the crippy, the real crippy from 1980s.
Wow, beautiful. I love it. Dedicated. It must hold a true spot in your heart. So I think with that, we're just about at the end of it. Did you have any comments or shout outs you wanted to make?
Shout out to Craig, good friend of mine. He's part of the story. We've grown up together. We've traveled around the world together. He goes by Captain Perks on Instagram, if anyone doesn't know that already. Shout out to Josh D and Kenji and that crew out there. And they're super good people. I love talking to them and hanging out with them. And then the crew that I'm working with here now, Freedom Town Holdings, there's Joey the Hard Way on Instagram, and Freedom Town Holdings Instagram is actually Manny, who's one of the guys that own there too. And then there's a Blockwork grower, who's the head grower there. He's a lot younger, but really, really well knowledge, and he's had a lot of experience for his age, and he's ex-military, so he's super like by the book and strict about everything. We talk to each other all the time about what's going on with the grow. So shout out to all those guys for sure. Shout out to my wife, or fiance, I should say. We haven't got married yet, but soon. We are about to open up a yoga studio together. It's going to be a art gallery for my art, and she's going to have her yoga studio at the same time. So we've been looking forward to doing that for a while. Yeah, that's what comes to mind at the moment as far as shout outs go.
Well, fantastic. A huge thank you again to the old school weed head surfer, accidental creator of the TK. We're also incredibly grateful. A big thank you to Marty of TK Origins for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Definitely, I've been enjoying some of your shows in the last few years. And, like I said, you hit me up probably 5 years ago, and I promised you I would do this with you one day. And I haven't been anywhere else on any podcast yet. So I figured when it came time that I would hit you up and do yours first.
Oh, look, I'm really, really grateful. It's been really fun chatting to you. I'm really appreciative for all the history you've shared.
No worries. I know it jumped all around in different times and years and dates, and a lot of stuff was probably left out. So maybe we could do a second one down the road.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Big shout out again. Thanks for your time.
No worries. Cheers, mate.
So there you have it, friends. What did you think? Huge thank you to Marty again for taking the time to come on the show. And a massive shout out to you guys for getting to the end. We appreciate you so much, just like we appreciate our incredible sponsors. If you want to help support the show, support our sponsors. Seeds Here Now, #1 seed bank in the industry. You know them, you love them, all the best breeders, the hottest drops, guarantee on satisfaction, not just germination. Why delay, guys? I promise you will be stoked if you get some seeds from them. They only stock the best in the game. Likewise, a massive shout out to our friends at Pulse Sensors, all the best and latest sensors in the game, including their new Pulse Hub, which integrates all of their units together to ensure that your operation is on point, producing bigger yields, better terps, higher potency. Whether you're running a single tent, a single room, or a multi-state operation, Pulse are here to help you guys. Get serious, get a Pulse. Further shout out to Copert, the #1 leaders in sustainable biocontrol solutions for pests and disease. If you're battling spider mites, please check out the Spidex Vital sachets. I can't tell you how annoying it is to have to spread carrier material in your garden just to get the predators out. These new sachets circumvent that. Just hang the sachets in your crop, let the persimillis walk out, do the work for you. Trust me guys, you won't look back. You give it one go, you will see the quality, you will be converted. A massive shout out to Copert. We appreciate your support so much. These guys are industry leaders, check them out. Huge shout out to our friends at Organics Alive, #1 for powdered organic fertilizers. If you're thinking about giving organics a go, get on board. Their products make it so easy. Whether you're in veg, transition or bloom, they've got products that make it easy to dip your toes in the water. Likewise, if you're a seasoned veteran of organics, I promise their products will help take your next crop to a whole new level. Massive shout out to Organics Alive. They have some of the best products on the market. Really fast release because they're small particle size. You will not go wrong with Organics Alive. Hit them up. Massive shout out and thank you. Finally, a big shout out to our friends at Dynavap. Just a week or two ago, they came out with some new models, the Titanium M series in 2 different colors. You can get yourself the Nebulum or the Quantium. I've been rocking the Nebulum. I love it, guys. Please give it a go. If you've ever tried a vape and felt like it didn't hit the way you were looking for it, these ones will. Truly a game changer, based out of the US, owned in the US. Dynavap, truly one of the best vape companies on the market. I really, really love their products and we are super appreciative of their support. Massive shout out to Dynavap. Last but not least, massive shout out to the Patreon gang. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to help ensure the show continues to happen, please consider checking out patreon.com/thepodcast. You will get early access to upcoming episodes, unheard exclusive interviews, and you go in the running to win a whole range of swag each month. We give away genetics, cannabis artwork, a whole range of awesome products, all while ensuring the show continues to happen. Again, a massive shout out to the Patreon gang. We love you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's about it for this one, my friends. I will catch you for the next one. Thanks so much for hanging out. Heavy Days, signing off from the Upside Down Library. We'll see you.